Welcome to the Short Funk Podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet. Today I want to talk a little bit about the idea that I had 4th of July associated with folks who listen to these podcasts actively promoting it within their particular communities, within their particular areas of interest, their friendship groups, this kind of thing. And in parallel to this, I described on Stone Ape the idea that a lot of these podcasts are what I would call sin podcasts in terms of the fact that they're not the kind of podcasts that people would actively want to tell their friends about. I mean, Model Rail Radio is a good example of this. Model railroaders are like an unseen army of folk out there. You would never really know that so many people in the general population were model railroaders until you started creating something like Model Rail Radio, and then you could see, by demonstrable impact, the number of model railroaders that were out there. So I had this idea, and Stone Ape fits into this as well. I mean, a lot of the stuff Hera and I ramble on about, you can't really talk about with good company. I mean, you know, it just doesn't fit in with good company. I've tried floating a few Stone Ape topics with good company, and I've realized very quickly that there are only so many conversations that can be had associated with teaching philosophy through X-rated camera sites. And, you know, after that, that's just Stone Ape. And in this light, the feedback that I've received, and this really comes from listeners that contacted me directly, was that people would much rather make, like, personal pitches to individuals within their friendship groups. Like, introduce the podcast to a few people rather than just broadly saying, I love this podcast about, you know, these two dudes chatting about nonsense, you know, or model railroading or this kind of stuff. So the personal approach seems to be what has come out of this community thing. Now, I've got to be frank, this thing was in no way a success. In fact, it was, on all probably chartable measures, a complete failure. Perhaps doing it on 4th of July was a problem. Perhaps trying to reach out to listeners, in particular, you know, folks that just have their own lives going on. I mean, a podcast is a very particular thing. I've lamented for a number of years that the podcasts that people get particularly passionate about are the podcasts that ask for money and people make donations to, because once you donate money to something, you have a different relationship to it. And this has been my frustration associated with doing these free podcasts, doing these podcasts that I just record and put out there, is that, you know, there's a percentage of the population that just doesn't get the same, like, passion associated with something that they're paying, you know, $2 to $10 a month for. And this, I've tried to raise with people as just a means of, like, maybe you should analyze this stuff in your own life and realize that actually by putting out free content, if you enjoy listening to it, it could be just as valid as the content that you're paying for. I don't know. I'm not going to be changing my format anytime soon, but I find it particularly curious that I can't get the passion of a certain group of listeners because, you know, they have this kind of capitalist viewpoint associated with their time, their energy, and ultimately their money. And when they're not paying for something, it just doesn't have the same resounding feeling with them. I don't know how I can break that. I just like putting it out there periodically, so maybe some of these people will do some self-reflection and realize that they can actually talk about the stuff that I do as well. Maybe. Who knows? Anyway. So in this light, you have to do these kind of experiments associated with asking people to promote your podcast just to get a sense of what the community is willing to stand. And I don't know. I mean, my perspective associated with Model Rail Radio, I think there's going to be a 150th show. I think there's going to be something to look forward to there. I've talked to my wife. She's going to be out of town. We're going to organize a spa weekend for her so that we know opportunity for her to catch pneumonia. And yeah, I think that's going to be a real boost for Model Rail Radio, this 150th show, and just bring in a bunch of people again and just do things again. It's probably going to be, I don't know, in current recording time, probably in about 2 years' time. So it's a bit of a way away. But still something for folks to think about and something to refocus the community on, because doing it every 100 shows, that was something. I mean, show 100, completely and utterly untouchable. But I think to just reinvigorate the community, maybe doing it every 50 shows might be the way to go. With regards to the other podcasts, Stone Ape, these kind of things, I mean, I've debated talking to Heron about doing a Stone Ape on location somewhere in LA or maybe somewhere in the Bay Area. I think the listeners are sufficiently diverse and sufficiently geographically diverse that we would need to have a new kick associated with that. And that's going to be a future Short Funk recording. Tom Barbalet in San Jose, signing out.